The rain poured down like the sky itself was mourning a man who never should have died. It soaked through every black umbrella in the Pinecrest HOA cemetery where even the headstones had to follow the rules. No taller than 3 feet, no gaudy flowers, and absolutely no personal messages that might detract from community aesthetics. Karen Vanderhaal, the self-crowned queen of Pinecrest, stood beside me in her spotless black Chanel suit, the one she saved for board meetings and charity galas. Her steel gray eyes were bone dry while she squeezed my arm with that practiced sympathy that made my skin crawl. "Such a tragedy, Rachel dear," she murmured loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "That curve on Oak Lane has always been dangerous, but the board simply couldn't justify the expense of proper repaving. Rules are rules for everyone's property values, you know." I nodded numbly, because what else could I do? The police report was neat and tidy. Excessive speed on a wet, HOA-maintained road, loss of control, fatal impact with a concrete barrier. Case closed. Ethan, my architect husband who designed half the houses in this neighborhood, had been driving home from a late meeting, probably exhausted, probably distracted by whatever sustainable fix he was dreaming up. Mourners filed past in their regulation black outfits, whispering the usual condolences. Simon Ralston, Ethan's best friend and the HOA treasurer, gave my shoulder a squeeze that smelled too strongly of expensive cologne. "Anything you need, Rachel, anything at all." Then Aaron appeared. Ethan's younger brother, the family black sheep who had dropped out of everything and disappeared for months at a time. He looked awkward in his cheap suit, jaw clenched as the rest of the family barely glanced his way. There had been some old falling out Ethan never fully explained. Aaron stopped right in front of me, dark eyes boring into mine. Without a word, he grabbed my hand in what looked like a consoling gesture and pressed something small and hard into my palm. "Whatever you do, watch this alone," he whispered so low only I heard. Then he melted back into the crowd like smoke. My fingers closed around the flash drive. Through my dress pocket, I felt the scrap of paper wrapped around it, 3 words scrawled in red ink. "Don't trust anyone." The rest of the service blurred past. I delivered the eulogy I'd written at 3 a.m., talking about Ethan's passion for building things that actually lasted, his dreams of a neighborhood that didn't just look perfect on paper. I accepted the condolences, the shoulder pats, the "he's in a better place" nonsense, all while that little black drive burned a hole in my pocket hotter than the lies Karen was spinning about how the community must move forward together. It wasn't until I was back in the house Ethan had designed, the one with the hidden panels and smart lighting that Karen had once tried to fine us for being too modern, that I finally unwrapped the paper and slid the drive into my laptop. A single video file dated 1 week before the crash. I clicked play, and Ethan's face filled the screen. He was in his home office, blueprints on the wall behind him, but his usual calm was gone, replaced by raw anxiety, eyes darting toward the door like he expected Karen to burst in any second. "Rachel, if you're watching this, something's happened to me," and Aaron kept his promise. "I found something in the HOA books, something huge that could destroy everything they've built. I've been documenting it for weeks, but I think they know. I think a noise off camera made him freeze." He dropped his voice. "Everything you need is on this drive, the evidence, the recordings. But listen carefully. Don't trust anyone, especially not them." The video cut off, leaving me staring at my reflection in the black screen, a widow suddenly holding a live grenade. For the next 3 days, I stayed locked in Ethan's office, surrounded by his models and the faint smell of his coffee. The drive was packed with spreadsheets, photographs, audio files, and Ethan's careful margin notes. Original allocation, $47 million. Actual spend, $33 million. Where did the $14 million go? The Pinecrest Sustainable Upgrade Project. I remembered Ethan's excitement when the board hired him to design the new roads, pool, clubhouse, and green spaces using everyone's HOA dues. He had poured 18-hour days into it, believing it would be his legacy. Now the numbers screamed fraud. I clicked the first audio file. Ethan's hushed voice filled the room, talking to Kendra, the senior project analyst. "I've checked these numbers 15 times, Kendra. It's not an error. Every major material purchase, every contractor payment, there's a discrepancy. Small enough to miss unless you're looking, but it adds up to 14 million. The authorization signature's there from the very top. Kendra's reply was tight. Ethan, this is systematic. If the board is replacing premium asphalt with cheap filler substandard rebar electrical that won't pass code, families are going to live with this. People could get hurt. More recordings followed, each one worse. In one, Ethan confronted Simon in what sounded like the HOA boardroom. These purchase orders don't match the delivery receipts. We approved premium materials, but what showed up is junk. Someone pocketed the difference. Simon's smooth voice dripped dismissal. You're overthinking, Ethan. Construction has variables. Trust me, everything is above board. Ethan shot back. Then you won't mind if I present this at the next open board meeting. A pause, then Simon's tone turned ice cold. I'd be very careful about accusations you can't prove, Ethan. Very careful. Photographs showed forged signatures, altered contracts, and right there on the key approval form authorizing the shady payments was Karen Vanderill's unmistakable signature. My mother-in-law, the woman who had stood dry-eyed at her own son's funeral while preaching community values. The final recording was dated the night before the crash. Ethan sounded exhausted, broken. I'm taking everything to Davidson tomorrow, the only lawyer not in their pocket. If something happens before I get there, Rachel, I'm sorry. These roads, these amenities we're building with substandard junk, kids ride bikes here, families swim in that pool. I couldn't let it happen. A door slammed. Ethan whispered, someone's here. If this is my last message, I love you. Trust Aaron. You never took their money. And whatever you do, don't let them win. I sat in the dark, trembling with rage and grief. My husband hadn't died in an accident. He had been murdered for trying to expose a $14 million scam that put every resident in Pinecrest at risk. And his own mother, the HOA president, might have signed the order. The next morning, the first violation notice arrived in my mailbox. Overgrown grass, 0.2 inches beyond regulation height, $2.50 fine. Emotional distress to the community noted. Karen's signature at the bottom with a little smiley face sticker. I paid it with a smile because I was done being the quiet widow they could bully. I was just getting started. Finding Kendra Voss was easier than it should have been. Her LinkedIn still listed her as senior project analyst for the Pinecrest HOA until 2 weeks ago when it suddenly switched to seeking new opportunities. The timing screamed cleanup. I messaged her vaguely. Ethan Dwyer's widow. We need to talk about the sustainable upgrade. Her reply came fast. Cisco's Cafe, Thursday, 2 p.m. Come alone. Cisco's was the kind of strip mall coffee shop where whistleblowers met in the back corner away from HOA spies. Kendra, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s, looked exhausted, lines of stress carved around her mouth. You look like him, she said as I sat down. Same jaw when you're pissed. She wrapped her hands around her coffee like it was the only solid thing left. Ethan was the only board-adjacent person who actually cared if the math added up. I'm sorry for your loss. He was a good man. Was it really an accident? I asked point blank. Kendra's laugh was bitter as day-old coffee. You wouldn't be here if you believed that. I slid my phone across, showing a screenshot from the drive. She glanced around, then leaned in. 6 weeks ago, Ethan came to me with the numbers. At first, I thought he was paranoid. Discrepancies happen. But the deeper we dug, the worse it got. They swapped premium asphalt for cheap filler rebar. That bends. If you look at it wrong, electrical, that'll short in the first storm. 14 million skimmed, probably more. The real number is buried in shell companies. She slid a folder across the table. I kept copies. Call it insurance or paranoia after what happened to Ethan. Inside were inspection reports, photos of half-finished roads where the new pavement already had cracks wide enough to swallow a tire, and test results showing concrete that wouldn't hold a tricycle, let alone a family SUV. 800 families think they're living the American dream in a safe HOA community, I whispered, horrified. Kendra's voice cracked. Ethan scheduled a full board presentation for Monday. He never made it. Simon knew because he controls the agenda. And Karen, she hesitated, she chairs the board. Her signature is on every shady approval. Ethan kept hoping there was an explanation that his own mother couldn't have known. But a $14 million theft doesn't happen without the president's blessing. I stared at the papers, my mind racing. Ethan had mentioned a lawyer, Davidson. Did he ever reach that meeting? No. The crash happened Sunday night. Davidson called the office Monday, asking why Ethan missed their appointment. Kendra leaned closer. They fired me the day after the funeral. Restructuring, they said. 12 years, no bad reviews. They're wiping anyone who might have seen what Ethan saw. You're safe for now because you're the grieving widow. But once the estate settles and they think you've moved on, she didn't finish. I thought of Karen's dry eyes at the funeral Simon's fake shoulder pat. They were already circling. Kendra gave me a card. Marcus Chun, forensic accountant. Expensive but clean, no HOA ties. If you're serious, you'll need him to make the numbers bulletproof in court. She stood to leave, then paused. Ethan talked about you nonstop. Said you were the strongest person he knew. He'd be proud of whatever you're about to do. After she left, I sat there staring at the evidence. She was right. Ethan had confronted them head-on and died. I wouldn't make the same mistake. That night, I called Aaron. I need your help. Figured you might, he replied dryly. Meet me at the cabin tomorrow. And Rachel, tell no one where you're going. Not a soul. The cabin Ethan designed years ago sat deep in the woods, just outside Pinecrest city limits, a quiet escape from HOA busybodies. Aaron's rusty truck was already there. Inside, he had a fire going, looking older than his 30 years worn by whatever had driven him away from Karen's world. You want to know about Mother and the HOA, he said without hello. It started 15 years ago when Dad died. The family construction business was circling the drain. Then suddenly Karen had cash. Lots of it. She claimed life insurance, but the math never added up. She sold Dad's company to the HOA management group for pennies, then used insider info to buy voting shares before they announced the big expansion. Turned those pennies into millions. He stared into the flames. When I found out, I confronted her. She offered me a cut, said it was for the family. I walked away. Ethan was at MIT, focused on architecture. Karen made sure he never saw the dirty details. By graduation, she was HOA president, offering him his dream project. He thought he earned it on merit. Aaron's voice softened. Maybe he did, but she made sure he never looked too closely at where the dues went. I thought of Ethan's pride the day the board approved his sustainable upgrade plans. Aaron pulled out a thick envelope. After you called, I dug through my storage. Been keeping my own files for years. Paranoia or self-preservation, take your pick. Inside were bank statements, old emails, photos of documents showing Karen's steady rise, every windfall preceded by a convenient rival's disappearance. She's ruthless, I said, studying a photo of Karen and Simon laughing at a charity gala. But her own son? Aaron finished my thought. A year ago, I would have said no. But a year ago, Ethan wasn't threatening to blow $14 million in skimmed dues that lead straight back to her. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I answered on speaker so Aaron could hear. An elderly voice, nervous. Mrs. Dwyer, this is Donald Davidson. I was supposed to meet your husband, the lawyer. I put him on speaker. Mr. Davidson, I have the documents Ethan was bringing you. Relief flooded his voice. Thank God. I've been getting calls, threats. Someone knows my grandkids' schools, my wife's medical records. I'm 73, I can't, his voice broke. It's okay, I said, though rage boiled in my chest. Can you at least tell me what Ethan discussed? He called it the nuclear option. He drafted trust documents that would transfer his voting shares and project control to you if his death looked suspicious. Verbal instructions only because he never made the meeting. If you prove the fraud and that it wasn't an accident, those shares become yours. Enough to force a full audit, take the board seat. Combined with sympathetic residents, it could flip the whole HOA. Aaron and I locked eyes. 30% voting power. No wonder Karen was already moving to contest the will. Davidson promised he'd written everything down, notarized. If something happens to me, my partner will get it to the right people. After he hung up, Aaron spoke quietly. She's coming for you hard now. Karen doesn't leave loose ends. I gathered the papers. Then I'd better tie them first. Kendra gave me a forensic accountant. Will you come with me? I need someone I trust. Aaron stood resolve, hardening his face. Ethan asked me to protect you if anything happened. I failed him once. I won't fail again. As we left the cabin, I looked around at Ethan's blueprints still tacked to the walls. I'm going to destroy her, I whispered. Your mother, Simon, everyone who touched this. Aaron's smile was grim. Good. It's about time someone did. The law offices of Brennan Klein sat on the top floor of a glass tower, all steel and ambition. I'd hired them on Marcus Chen's recommendation. Sarah Brennan, sharp-eyed, immaculately dressed, reviewed my mountain of evidence with the focus of a hawk. This is substantial, she said after 2 hours. The fraud is crystal clear. 14 million in HOA dues vanished in a shell company's cheap materials that make every road and pool in Pinecrest a lawsuit waiting to happen. But connecting it to murder? That's another hill. She tapped a fresh legal filing that had arrived that morning. Karen and Simon, as HOA representatives, are suing you for defamation, claiming you're spreading baseless rumors. They're also asking the court to freeze Ethan's assets, including your joint accounts, pending an investigation into whether you unduly influenced him. I laughed bitterly. They're trying to starve me out before I can fight. Sarah leaned back. Classic bully tactic. But they just opened the door to discovery. We could demand every board email, every financial record, every contractor contract. We can hurt them, but to win, to prove murder, we need the smoking gun. That afternoon, I came home to find my front door slightly ajar. Heart hammering, I called Aaron instead of walking in. Get out of there now, he ordered. Public place. I'm coming. I drove to the shopping center, hands shaking. When Aaron arrived, we went back together. The intrusion was subtle, but thorough. Drawers opened and closed, papers moved just enough to notice Ethan's office rearranged. They were looking for the drive, Aaron said, checking windows. Question is, did they find it? I went straight to Ethan's hidden safe behind the false panel he'd built. Empty except for a single sheet of paper. Some fights aren't worth having. Walk away while you still can. This is your only warning. Like hell. But Ethan had been too smart for one hiding spot. I remembered his habits. I pulled out the bottom drawer of his drafting table completely. Taped underneath, another flash drive. Clever bastard, Aaron muttered admiringly. This drive held video files. The first showed Ethan secretly installing tiny cameras in the HOA boardroom weeks earlier. The second was pure gold. A meeting between Karen, Simon, and 2 men I didn't recognize. Simon spoke first. The Davidson situation is handled. He won't be a problem. Karen's voice was ice. And my son? Still planning to go public. One of the strangers leaned in. Then we need a permanent solution. Make it look accidental. That curve on Oak Lane, rain forecast Sunday night, perfect. Karen hesitated, a split-second maternal instinct warring with self-preservation. Then self-preservation won. Make it clean. No suffering. The video ended. Aaron and I sat stunned. We have them, I whispered. Actually have them. Aaron breathed. She agreed to murder her own son. Our mother. I copied everything immediately, 1 for Sarah, 1 for Aaron, 1 uploaded to a secure cloud. Then I called Sarah. I found your smoking gun. How fast can you get an emergency injunction? Her voice crackled with new energy. With this, I can have federal agents at their doors by morning, Rachel. This is conspiracy to commit murder. This goes federal. Good. But I want more than arrests. I want them to know it was me. I want them to watch everything they built burn. Sarah's respect was audible. We'll file criminal charges and a civil wrongful death suit simultaneously. With this evidence, we pierce the corporate veil, go after personal assets. They lose everything. That night, I stood in Ethan's office, surrounded by his dreams. Tomorrow the storm would break, but tonight I grieved the man who died, trying to protect families from a pool that might collapse or a road that might send another car into a barrier. I whispered to his photo, I'm sorry you had to learn what they really were. But I promise my love they will pay for every second. Aaron suggested we return to the cabin before the arrests. There's more you need to see. In the early morning mist, Ethan's old security system still hummed. Aaron connected his laptop, downloading files. Most were innocent deer at dawn hikers. But 2 weeks before the crash, timestamps jumped out. A black Mercedes pulled up. Simon stepped out, followed by a lean, weathered man, Marcus Webb, former HOA security contractor, now freelance problem solver. They walked the perimeter of the cabin, clearly scouting where Ethan parked. Webb pointed under an invisible hood, making notes. Their purpose was obvious, planning the sabotage. 3 days later, Webb returned, a lone toolbox in hand, spending 40 minutes near the parking spot consulting his phone. When he left, he carried something wrapped in cloth, parts removed or tampered with. Ethan drove that compromised car for days. Aaron said, voice thick, waiting for the right rain. I felt nausea rise, thinking of my husband oblivious while death ticked under his hood. We copied the footage, sent it to Sarah. Her reply was instant. This proves premeditation. Warrants are expediting. But Rachel, you wanted them to know it was you. That evening, Aaron and I sat in Murphy's bar, watching Webb drink alone. I slid into his booth across from him. His hand twitched toward his jacket. Aaron appeared beside him. Wouldn't do that unless you want the whole bar to know who you are. Webb's eyes narrowed. I don't know you, but I know you, I said, placing a printed screenshot of the cabin footage on the table. Amazing how clear those cameras are even at distance. His face drained of color. Here's what happens tomorrow morning. Federal agents arrest Karen and Simon for conspiracy to commit murder. Your name is all over their files. How long before they flip on you for a deal? You try to bluff. I showed him the boardroom video, then the sabotage footage. Murder for hire. Federal crime. Life without parole. You give a full confession tonight, turn state's evidence, maybe you get 20 years instead of life. Webb's composure cracked. They'll kill me. They'll kill you anyway once they're locked up. At least in federal custody you breathe. I stood. 1 hour to the FBI field office. After that, you're just another name on the warrant. 40 minutes later, we watched from the truck as Webb drove toward downtown. Think he'll do it? Aaron asked. He's a survivor. He'll make the deal. As we drove back, I felt the shift. Grief was still there, heavy as wet concrete, but now a shared space with something sharper. Satisfaction. Ethan's killers have been so careful, so smug in their HOA kingdom of rules and fines. They never counted on the quiet widow who had been watching, learning, paying their stupid grass fines with a smile while building the case that would bury them. Tomorrow, their perfect little neighborhood would burn, and I would have the front row seat. The federal courthouse loomed like a fortress against the Denver skyline. 3 months after Ethan's death, I walked up those steps flanked by Sarah Brennan and her team. Behind us, media crews jostled. The story had exploded. HOA fraud, murder, conspiracy, widow's quest. Inside courtroom 7, the air crackled. On one side sat the defendants, Karen Vanderhaal, still impeccable in Navy, but with new worry lines as Simon Ralston, confidence replaced by panic. 3 other board members, and Marcus Webb in prison orange, now star witness after his deal. All rise. Judge Patricia Thornton took the bench. This was no longer just civil. Federal criminal charges had been added after Webb's confession laid bare the depth. Sarah rose for opening. Your Honor, we will prove these defendants conspired to steal $14 million in HOA dues, replacing materials with junk that endangered every resident. When Ethan Dwyer threatened to expose them at an open meeting, they murdered him to silence the truth. Defense objected. Overruled. Sarah walked the jury through the numbers, the substandard roads, the pool rebar that would never hold the electrical that could spark fires. Kendra Voss testified, first voice steady. Ethan was meticulous. He documented because he knew how dangerous it was for families. The forensic accountant broke down the money trail in plain language. $14 million funneled through shell companies traceable to accounts Karen and Simon controlled. Then Sarah introduced the boardroom video. Objection overruled. The room fell silent as the jury watched Karen agree to her own son's murder. Several jurors recoiled. One covered her mouth. Simon's voice on tape was damning. The Davidson situation is handled. Webb took the stand, clinical, devastating. I loosened the brake, coupling designed to fail under hard braking in wet conditions. The rain that Sunday was the trigger. Payment $50,000 half up front. Aaron testified next, voice breaking when he described identifying Ethan's body and the family dynamics, Karen's ruthless rise. Finally, it was my turn. Sarah guided me gently through finding the drive, Ethan's last video, the documentation. They played it. Ethan's exhausted face filled the screen. If something happens, Rachel, I'm sorry, these homes, these roads, they're using junk. People could get hurt. Families, children. I couldn't let that happen. His whisper, someone's here, I love you. Trust Aaron. Don't let them win. Jurors cried. Defense tried everything, entrapment, frame job, but when they put Simon on the stand, he crumbled under cross. It was her idea, he shouted, pointing at Karen. She said Ethan would destroy everything we built. Chaos erupted. Karen lunged at him, screaming. Marshals moved and gavels hammered. When order returned, Sarah stood. One final piece, Your Honor. She produced the trust documents Ethan had prepared, properly notarized. These prove Ethan knew his life was in danger. He tried to protect his wife and the truth, even if they silenced him. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. Guilty. All counts. Conspiracy, wire fraud, mail fraud, murder for hire. As verdicts were read, I watched Karen's empire collapse. She would die in prison. Simon faced 40 years minimum, the others decades. But the criminal verdict was only the beginning. Civil proceedings activated Ethan's trust provisions. I was awarded his voting shares, damages for wrongful death, and controlling interest in the Sustainable Upgrade Project, which would now be rebuilt properly, as Ethan intended. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted. I stopped at the microphone. My husband died because he refused to let families move into dangerous homes built on lies. His integrity cost him everything. Today, justice was served. I will use every resource to make Pinecrest the safe community he dreamed of. His killers tried to silence him. Instead, they gave his vision a voice that will last generations. In the crowd, Aaron nodded. We had won, but the victory tasted hollow without Ethan. Marshals led them away. Karen, first designer heels, clicking one last time. She turned once, and for a split second, I saw something flicker, regret, fear, or with just the shock of a woman who had ruled her little kingdom with fines and fear finally facing consequences. Simon sobbed, expensive suit ruined. The other executives followed, lawyers already dialing appeals that would go nowhere. 3 weeks later, I stood at the groundbreaking for the rebuilt Pinecrest Sustainable Project. We had torn out every cheap road, every faulty beam, started fresh with architects who shared Ethan's vision. The first building would bear his name, the Ethan Dwyer Center for Safe Living. Kendra stood beside me, now head of Project Integrity. Aaron was there, finally free of the family shadow. Even Davidson attended, the old lawyer who had found his courage. I spoke into the microphone. Ethan believed good design could protect people. He died protecting that belief. Today we honor him with action. Every brick, every beam will meet the highest standards because that is what he demanded. As I drove home, I stopped at the cemetery. Ethan's simple headstone gleamed. I placed my hand on the granite. We won, my love. Karen got life without parole. The jury was unanimous, first ballot. Simon will die behind bars. The project, it's going to be everything you dreamed. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear his laugh, see his smile when he talked about neighborhoods that lasted. But I traded all to have you back, I whispered. The flash drive still sits in my safe. Some nights, I watch Ethan's last message frozen on the screen, saying he loved me. Marcus Webb had been right about one thing during his testimony: Ethan had known the risks. He had prepared for his death with the same precision he brought to every blueprint, building his own justice system in case the real one failed. The USB, the hidden cameras, the trust documents, all of it. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. Aaron texting dinner plans, Sarah updating civil suits, Kendra sending construction photos. I had a new family now forged in the fight. It wasn't the life I planned, but it was the life Ethan's courage made possible. Forgiveness stayed buried with him. I would never forgive Karen's betrayal or Simon's greed. But I could forgive Ethan for being the man who couldn't walk away from the truth even when it killed him. Because that was exactly the man I fell in love with. And in the end, his truth won. The final chapter of this Pinecrest nightmare played out exactly as Ethan would have wanted: quiet, precise, and devastatingly fair. After the verdicts, the HOA board was dissolved by court order pending new elections. Residents who had spent years terrified of Karen's violation notices and $500 fines for a flag too big or a holiday light one day late suddenly found their voices. Petitions circulated. Town halls filled. And when the new board was seated, guess who received the most write-in votes? The quiet widow who had paid every petty fine with a smile while collecting the evidence that freed them all. I took the seat with zero drama. No victory speech, just a simple agenda item. Full forensic audit of every dime spent on the sustainable upgrade and immediate replacement of every substandard road pool and electrical system at the defendant's personal expense. The courtroom had stripped them of assets, but the judge added a nice kicker: restitution to the HOA fund. Karen's mansion, Simon's luxury cars, everything auctioned, and the proceeds poured back into the community they had cheated. Black humor at its finest, watching Karen's Chanel suits and Simon's golf clubs sold off on public listings while former neighbors bid with glee. Property values just went up, one resident joked in the comments. But the real satisfaction came the day the first new asphalt truck rolled onto Oak Lane, the very curve that had taken Ethan. I stood there with Aaron, Kendra, and a small crowd of residents who had once whispered behind my back. The old crack filler was ripped out in chunks and carted away like the lies it represented. Engineers tested every inch. This would have held a tank, Ethan, one said quietly. I nodded because that was the point. No more shortcuts, no more skimmed, dues, no more Karen deciding which families deserve safety. Karen's last court appearance was for sentencing. She stood in an orange jumpsuit, the same woman who once fined me for emotional distress to the community, now begging for mercy, citing her years of service. The judge simply read the verdict again: life without parole, and added, "The court notes the defendant's abuse of power turned a neighborhood into a criminal enterprise. Justice may be blind, but the residents of Pinecrest are not." Karen's face when the gavel fell that final time was the picture of a Karen who had finally run out of rules to hide behind. No more, but the covenants say, no more polite threats. Just the cold reality of steel doors and orange scrubs. Simon fared little better: 40 years and a restitution order that would keep him broke until he was 80. The other board members took pleas that still meant decades and public shaming. Webb got his 20 years, but at least he was breathing something Karen could no longer say. Months later, the neighborhood looked different. Lawns were still green, but now they had personality. Flags flew. Holiday lights stayed up past the arbitrary date. And the new community pool sparkled with proper rebar and electrical that wouldn't fry a kid on a summer day. At the dedication of the Ethan Dwyer Center, I cut the ribbon beside a plaque that read simply, "For the man who refused to let rules replace right." Residents cheered not because I was the new president, but because the fear was gone. The Karen era was over. One quiet evening, I sat on the porch of the house Ethan built, the one Karen had once tried to fine into submission. Aaron brought over beers. "You did it," he said. Ethan would be proud. I looked at the perfectly paved street where his car had once failed. He just wanted safe homes. He never wanted any of this power. "No," Aaron agreed, "but he would have wanted the truth out. And you gave him that louder than he ever could." Sarah stopped by later with final papers. "The last civil suits settled, the remaining conspirators bankrupt. You're now majority controller of the entire upgrade budget," she said. "Use it wisely." I already was. Every new project went through Kendra's integrity checks. No shortcuts. No favorites. Just the standards Ethan had fought for. Some nights, I still pull out the flash drive and watch Ethan's last message. His face on the screen still makes my chest tighten, but now the grief shares space with gratitude. He had built his own safety net, the cameras, the documents, the trust, all of it, because he knew the system might fail. And almost did. But the quiet widow he trusted endured the fines, the slander, the break-ins, and turned the very rules Karen worshipped into the weapon that destroyed her. The wind picked up, rustling the new trees we planted along Oak Lane. For a moment, I could almost hear Ethan's voice laughing about how the neighborhood finally looked the way he always imagined, not perfect on paper, but safe for the families who live there. "We won, my love," I whispered to the empty porch. And this time the rules work for everyone. The HOA Karen, who thought she could murder the truth and hide behind covenants, learned the hardest lesson of all. Some widows don't stay quiet. Some widows watch, learn, pay the stupid fines, and then burn the whole kingdom down with a smile. And when the smoke clears, the neighborhood is better for it.